BrightRock believes that with every change in life comes opportunity, and the budget speech isn't any different. The minister's speech means change for us all, because whether the numbers are big or small, change always counts. This budget speech 2023 special edition of the BizNews Power Hour was illuminated by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes.
Well, hi, I'm Linda van Tilburg for BizNews. Well, South African Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered his Budget 2023 speech in Parliament in Cape Town, and we have Efficient Group founder and economist Dawie Roodt with us. Dawie, you said before the budget that South Africa is in for a tough 2023. Do you feel a bit lighter after the budget speech?
Hello, yes, I think the Minister of Finance probably did as well as he possibly can, but I've got one major issue with the Minister's estimates, and that is his estimates in terms of economic growth, which is going to be crucial, of course. He's penciling in close to about 1% for this year and also slightly stronger growth for years thereafter. I really doubt on whether we're going to see that. That's the first major issue that I have, and that means that his revenue is probably not going to materialize. The second one that I'm a bit concerned about is that we've seen quite a nice overrun in terms of revenue because of the nice commodity cycle. The commodity cycle has cooled quite a lot, and I don't think we can reckon on much of that in this year and coming years as well. So I'm quite concerned about the revenue side of the Minister of Finance. And of course, he did not increase any taxes, which of course I'm very happy about. But on the spending side, he's trying to keep spending, especially non-interest spending, he's trying to keep that down in real terms, which is a good thing, but there, of course, are a couple of things outstanding there. One is he's budgeting for a 3.3% increase in the wage bill, and the trade unions obviously is not going to like that. So there's a good possibility that we're going to see more spending eventually materialize on the spending side. So if you put all of this together, I'm afraid I don't think his estimates on the fiscal deficit and his debt trajectory over the next couple of years will be achievable. And that, of course, is crucial when it comes to things like, for example, the downgrades and the like.
What did you think about these announcements regarding Eskom?
Yeah, we need some more information on that. I haven't studied everything, but it seems to me he's going to take over something like 60 billion or so annually for the next couple of years. And in 3 years' time, he's going to take over a total amount of about 70 billion, a total amount of just over 250 billion. He's planning to take over. It was pretty much expected, pretty much in line with expectations. But the real crucial part about Eskom is that we need a radical restructuring of Eskom in terms of its finances and in terms of its operations. And that is just not happening. Eskom needs to be fixed, and that means inevitably that you have to fire a lot of people and that you have to collect the money that the municipalities owe to you, as an example. And of course, that is politically extremely difficult to do, especially just before an election. But it was pretty much expected, the takeover of Eskom's debt. What I'm very disappointed in is that the state-owned enterprises like South African Airways is getting another R1 billion, and the privatization plan has not been completed yet, or the part privatization plan has not been completed yet. And this is how many turnaround plans that we've had at South African Airways. The post office is getting another 2.5 billion rand or so. And again, we don't have a proper restructuring plan for the post office either. So those are two things that I'm certainly, but nobody should be happy about that.
Are the tax incentives for solar power, do you think the government is moving closer to actually privatizing power generation in the country?
Yeah, electricity generation and distribution will be privatized in South Africa exactly the same way that South African Airways has been privatized in a way. Not really, of course, but simply what is happening, they're simply dying. And Eskom is going to die as well. I am not in favor of a subsidy on these solar panels. It's not a good idea to stop subsidizing these kinds of things. You distort all sort of underlying forces in the economy. So I'm not in favor of this. And I'm also not in favor of the minister extending the diesel support especially for manufacturers of foodstuffs in the country. So no, I'm not in favor of that. It creates just more and more opportunities for misuse and corruption and everything that goes with that. So I'm not in favor of that. But we're talking about relatively small amounts of money. So it's not really going to break the bank.
So who do you think were the winners in this, apart from Eskom and the bit of SOEs and the post office that you mentioned, and the welfare grants? Who are the winners in this budget?
I guess the only real winners in total, the minister is planning to spend less in real terms. Of course, there's a significant increase in interest payments over the next couple of years, and that is simply because the debt levels keeps on going up. But apart from that, there's nobody really getting more money. In terms of the revenue side, the taxes, nobody's really paying much more. In fact, there's a bit of a reduction in some of the taxes. I think the only potential losers are the people, smokers and the drinkers, but that also was increased in line with inflation. So this was not much of a change from previous years. There are no winners or losers in this budget. It's pretty much the same as business as usual.
So have you looked at how markets have reacted to this by now?
Yes, I had a look. The rand initially started off a little bit stronger, and then during the speech, the rand weakened a little bit. And I guess part of that has to do with some outstanding issues as far as Eskom is still concerned. So the rand did weaken a little bit, but not too much. I see currently it's trading at about 18.25, where it was this morning. So it's back at its morning levels again.
Okay, and the bond market?
I guess the bond market also weakened a little bit. Let me have a look. The bond market, yes, the bond market appreciated a little bit. I think what the bond market is telling us, that there was a possibility. So the bond market is actually a little bit stronger. And I think the part of the reason for that is because the takeover, the trajectory for a takeover of Eskom debt was probably a little bit lower than what the bond market initially expected.
Yeah, so the losers are, as you said, the normal thing of sin taxes. Who else do you think are the losers in this budget?
Something that I'm very concerned about is that the president, and the minister actually sort of alluded to that as well, and that the president previously said that this is not the right time for Eskom to implement this Nersa increase. And the president also indicated some time ago that some of the debt of the local authorities, and he mentioned Soweto, should be written down. And the president did, according to a journalist, the minister did talk in his press release before the budget speech, and while he was talking to journalists, that in some cases it's simply impossible for some of these local authorities to pay their debt that they owe to Eskom, which means that this debt will eventually have to be written off. And this is a major issue. There's no way that we can fix the problems at Eskom if we do not address this culture of non-payment. If those debts are written off, then what? Are they going to suddenly start paying? I'm not so sure about that. So I think what these kind of things, like for example, local authorities, this culture of no payment in many instances, as well as the president suggesting that Eskom should not increase the Nersa increase, those are all things that point to me to one thing only, and that is that the Eskom problem will not be solved. Eskom will probably die a slow death, like what's happened to South African Airways and what is currently happening to the post office as well. So clearly politicians are not prepared to take a political or make political difficult decisions, especially now, just before an election.
So it was quite interesting that defense spending seems to be going up.
Yeah, defense spending has actually been on the losing side for many, many years. So a bit of an increase in the defense spending, I guess one should have expected that, because the army and everything that goes with the army and defense in South Africa has basically collapsed. I guess that the minister simply did not have any choice but to increase a little bit on that. And I saw a smallish increase for some in protection as well, for the police as well. But the biggest single expense item that's going up sharpest, of course, is interest on state debt. But the good news, I think let's give credit where it's due. The good news is that according to the minister's estimates, we will be running a primary deficit this year. So that means that the minister is really trying to keep a lid on normal discretionary spending as much as he possibly can. And if you subtract interest payment from that, then we're actually running a surplus on the fiscal deficit. And that is indeed very good news.
Well, somebody commented on how efficient this department seems to function despite of the difficulties of South Africa. And SARS is also always very efficient. does it strike you that they are so efficient and other parties are so inefficient that there seems to be this huge gap in efficiency of government between these departments and others?
I think Treasury, they have very, very competent people. They've always had very competent people. They were a bit of an issue during the time of Zuma. But when it comes to taking money out of our pockets, they've always been good. SARS has always been good. And part of the reason for the significant overrun in the state revenue in the current financial year, which is quite a lot, it's nearly 100 billion rand, by the way, can be ascribed to efficiencies at SARS. So it's not only the commodity cycle, it's also because SARS is doing its job and collecting all those taxes. If only they can be quite as good as being diligent when it comes to the spending side of that money as well. But when it comes to collecting money, taking money out of our pockets, they are excellent. They're really good with that. And SARS is really a professional outfit. And the same goes to Treasury as well.
Well, there's also an injection into the budget of SARS this year to increase their capability of raising money.
Yeah, SARS is going to get more money, but I've listened to Kieswetter, our collector of revenue in South Africa, and they are really putting an effort in getting all those tax evaders into the net, and they are quite successful in getting personal income tax evaders into the net, and also especially company taxpayers evaders into the net as well. So those two major revenue sources to the Minister of Finance is doing very well, partly because of SARS. They're really pulling up their socks recently.
I saw an assessment this week that ministers of finance in South Africa tend to wear rose-tinted glasses when it comes to estimating growth, except in the past year. So do you think, you said he's again doing that, what do you think growth would be?
No. What came out yesterday is the South African Reserve Bank's leading indicator. That is basically an indicator telling us what economic growth is likely to look like over the next couple of quarters. And according to the leading indicator of the South African Reserve Bank, we are probably already in a recession. So the minister is expecting economic growth of close to 1%. I really doubt that. The South African Reserve Bank's got growth at 0.3%. So I think economic growth closer to about 0% can be expected this year, or maybe even a recession, maybe even negative economic growth. And I can't foresee next year doing much better than that either. So it has to do with the lack of electricity, obviously, but some other factors weighing on the South African economy as well. So economic growth, I think that is the biggest single figure that I disagree with the Minister of Finance. I don't think economic growth is going to materialize at 1% where he expects it to be.
So the minister addressed the issue of us possibly being greylisted.
Yeah, well, listening to the minister, I think he's got some inside info. I think he has already been informed that South Africa is going to get greylisted. Of course, the immediate impact is not going to be so significant on the economy, but eventually it is going to weigh on economic growth. And that's another reason why I'm quite negative and pessimistic about economic growth this year and next year as well. But the minister is throwing a lot of money to try to prevent, well, at least he tries to get us back on the white list again. But it seems to be a fait accompli, as that we are going to get moved to the grey list, and that's going to be quite painful.
Okay,
and maybe I can add, Linda. Maybe I can add to that.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
That's perhaps part of the reason why the rand seems to be taking a bit of a knock now as well, because the grey list in itself is likely to be quite negative to the exchange rate.
Oh, so that probably explains it. Because initially it went up a little bit when he just started speaking.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dawie Roodt.
This Budget Speech 2023 special edition of the BizNews Power Hour was illuminated by BrightRock, the first ever needs-matched life insurance that changes as your life changes.